The doctor's words rang in Nora Thorne's ears like a death knell as she stood on the dusty main street of Brownsville, Texas, clutching the letter her former fiancé had written to break their engagement. Unable to bear children. The diagnosis had come 3 months ago, but today, May 15th, 1882, was the day Thomas had finally put his rejection in writing, citing his family's need for heirs and his duty to his name. She was 23 years old, and in this unforgiving corner of the world, where the Rio Grande separated civilization from wilderness, a woman's worth was measured in her ability to produce sons who could work the land and carry on legacies. Nora crumpled the letter in her fist and let the hot Texas wind snatch it away, watching as it tumbled down the street past the general store, the saloon, and the land office. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry where anyone could see. She had already endured enough pitying looks from the women at church, and knowing glances from the men who had once tipped their hats to her with interest. Now they looked through her as if she were already a ghost, a cautionary tale about damaged goods. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Nora sought refuge under the awning of the mercantile. Her aunt's boarding house was only 2 blocks away, but she could not face Aunt Mabel's well-meaning sympathy just yet. Through the window, she could see bolts of fabric stacked neatly on shelves, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where her body had not betrayed her, where she could have worn white lace and carried orange blossoms down the aisle of the Baptist church. "Pardon me, miss," a voice said, low and careful. Nora turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, hat in hand. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and there was something gentle in the way he held himself, despite the gun belt at his hip and the dust that covered his clothes from boot to shoulder. "I did not mean to startle you," he continued when she said nothing. "I only wanted to make sure you were well. You looked troubled." Nora straightened her spine and forced herself to meet his gaze. "I am perfectly fine, sir. Thank you for your concern." He studied her for a moment with those quiet eyes, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see straight through her polite deflection. But instead of pressing, he simply nodded and moved to step past her into the store. Then he paused. "For what it is worth," he said, his voice barely audible above the sound of a freight wagon rumbling past. "Whatever is troubling you, I hope you know that storms always pass, even the worst ones." Before Nora could respond, he disappeared into the mercantile, leaving her standing alone with those unexpected words settling over her like a cool breeze in the suffocating heat. She did not know who he was, but something about the encounter left her feeling slightly less hollow than she had moments before. That evening, Aunt Mabel's boarding house was filled with the usual collection of dusty travelers and permanent residents. Nora helped serve supper, carrying platters of roasted chicken and bowls of beans to the long table where 8 people sat elbow to elbow. She was surprised to see the man from earlier sitting at the far end, his hair still damp from washing at the pump out back. "Nora, dear, this is Colton Everett," Aunt Mabel announced cheerfully. "He has taken the room upstairs for the month. Mr. Everett is a horsebreaker, here to work with the ranches in the area." Colton stood politely when Nora approached with the coffee pot, and she noticed the calluses on his hands and the old scars across his knuckles. These were working hands, honest hands. "We met earlier, Miss Thorne," Colton said, accepting the coffee with a nod of thanks. "Though we were not properly introduced." "Mr. Everett," Nora acknowledged, keeping her voice neutral. She could feel Aunt Mabel's curious gaze and knew there would be questions later. Throughout the meal, Nora was acutely aware of Colton's presence, though he spoke little and seemed content to listen to the other boarders share news and gossip. A merchant from Corpus Christi talked about the new railroad expansion. A surveyor complained about the heat. Mrs. Henderson, a widow who had lived at the boarding house for 3 years, speculated about whether the town would finally get a proper schoolhouse. It was only when someone mentioned the upcoming social dance at the church that Nora felt the familiar sting of exclusion. She would not be going, not now that Thomas had made his rejection public. To attend would be to subject herself to whispers and speculation. "I heard Thomas Waverly is engaged to the Pritchard girl from San Antonio," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Such a lovely young woman, I am told, from a very good family." Nora's hand trembled slightly as she set down a bowl of potatoes, but she kept her expression carefully blank. "How nice for them," she managed. "Well, I think Mr. Waverly is a fool," Aunt Mabel announced loudly, fixing Mrs. Henderson, with a sharp look. "Any man who cannot see the value in my niece does not deserve her." The table fell silent, and Nora felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She mumbled an excuse about needing to check on the pie in the kitchen and fled before anyone could see the tears that threatened to spill over. She made it as far as the back porch before her composure crumbled. Sinking onto the wooden steps, she pressed her face into her hands and let the grief wash over her. It was not even Thomas she mourned, not really. She had realized months ago that she did not love him the way a woman should love the man she intended to marry. What she grieved was the future she had been promised, the one where she belonged somewhere and had purpose beyond being an object of pity. "Miss Thorne?" Nora's head snapped up. Colton Everett stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the kitchen lamps. She quickly wiped her eyes and stood, turning away from him. "Please, I would like to be alone," she said. "I will leave in a moment," Colton replied. "But first, I wanted to tell you something." When Nora did not respond, he continued, his voice steady and sure. "I do not know what that woman said to upset you, or what circumstances have brought you pain, but I know what it is like to feel as though you are not enough, to have people look at you and see only what you lack rather than what you are." Despite herself, Nora turned to face him. In the fading light, his features were softer, and there was a vulnerability in his expression that made her breath catch. "How could you possibly know?" she asked, her voice raw. Colton stepped out onto the porch, letting the door swing shut behind him. He leaned against the railing, giving her space. "My father was a rancher, a successful one. He had plans for me to take over the operation, to marry well, and produce grandchildren to carry on his legacy. But I could not be what he wanted. I loved working with horses more than managing land and money. I wanted to travel, to be free, not to be chained to expectations I could never meet." He paused, looking out at the darkening sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "He disowned me when I left, told me I was a disappointment, that I would never amount to anything. For a long time, I believed him. I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me because I could not want what I was supposed to want." Nora found herself drawn to his story, despite her pain. "What changed?" she whispered. Colton turned to look at her directly, and the honesty in his gaze made her heart skip. "I met a man in New Mexico who ran a horse ranch. He taught me that there are different ways to be successful, different kinds of worth beyond what society tells us we should be. He showed me that I could make a life doing what I loved, that my value was not determined by anyone else's expectations." "It is not the same," Nora said, though without much conviction. "You could still walk away and build something new. I cannot escape what I am, or rather, what I am not." She had not meant to be so revealing, but the words tumbled out before she could stop them. Colton was quiet for a long moment, and Nora braced herself for the inevitable questions, or worse, the pity. "You are enough as you are," Colton said finally, and the simple certainty in his voice made Nora's throat tighten. "Whatever you think you lack, whatever anyone has told you is wrong with you, it does not define your worth. You are a whole person deserving of respect and happiness exactly as you stand right now." Nora stared at him, these words from a near stranger cutting through the darkness that had enveloped her for months. She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to think that there could be a life beyond this pain. "You do not even know me," she said, but there was no accusation in it, only wonder. "That is true," Colton acknowledged, "but I know what I saw today on that street. I saw a woman standing tall despite carrying a heavy burden. I saw strength and dignity. That tells me more than 100 formal introductions ever could." Before Nora could respond, the back door opened and Aunt Mabel poked her head out. "Nora, dear, I need help with the dishes. Oh, Mr. Everett, I hope you are settling in well." "Very well, madam," Colton said, straightening. "I was just getting some air. I will leave you ladies to your work." He tipped his head to Nora and slipped past Aunt Mabel into the house. Nora's aunt gave her a long, searching look, but said nothing as Nora followed her inside. That night, lying in her narrow bed under the eaves, Nora replayed Colton's words over and over. "You are enough as you are." Could it be true? Could there really be a life where she was valued for something other than her ability to bear children? The possibility seemed too fragile to trust, but it glimmered in her chest like a tiny flame refusing to be extinguished. The next morning dawned hot and clear. Nora was in the kitchen before sunrise, helping Aunt Mabel prepare breakfast for the boarders. The familiar routine was comforting, and she lost herself in the simple tasks of slicing bread and frying eggs. When Colton appeared in the doorway dressed for work, his hat already dusty though the day had barely begun, Nora found herself acutely aware of his presence. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove and lingered for a moment. "Miss Thorne," he said, "I wonder if I might ask a favor." Nora looked up from the pan of eggs, surprised. "What kind of favor?" "I am starting work today at the Garrett Ranch, about 5 miles north. They have a young mare that needs training, but she is particularly skittish. I heard in town yesterday that you have a way with animals. The owner of the livery stable spoke highly of your skill with his injured horse last month." Nora felt a flush of pleasure at the unexpected compliment. It was true that she had spent hours working with the livery owner's gelding after it had tangled with barbed wire, patiently cleaning the wounds and earning the frightened animal's trust. But she had not realized anyone had taken special notice. "I do not know if I would call it skill," she said modestly. "I simply have patience, and animals seem to sense that." "That is exactly what this mare needs," Colton said. "Would you consider coming out to the ranch? I would pay you for your time, of course." Aunt Mabel, who had been listening while pretending to focus on her biscuits, spoke up immediately. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. Nora has been cooped up here too much lately. Some fresh air and useful work would do her good." Nora hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay hidden in the relative safety of the boarding house. But another part, the part that had responded to Colton's kindness the night before, wanted desperately to step back into the world. "I suppose I could come for a few hours," she said carefully, "if Aunt Mabel can spare me." "I can manage without you for one morning," her aunt said firmly. "You go on with Mr. Everett after breakfast." An hour later, Nora found herself sitting beside Colton on the bench of a borrowed wagon, heading north out of Brownsville. The morning air was still relatively cool, and the landscape stretched out in shades of brown and green, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. In the distance, she could see the pale curve of the Rio Grande. "Thank you for agreeing to come," Colton said, guiding the horses around a rut in the road. "I meant what I said about the mare. Old man Garrett bought her at auction, thinking she would be easy to train. But she has proven difficult. I could force her eventually, but I prefer gentler methods when possible." "How long have you been breaking horses?" Nora asked, grateful for a safe topic of conversation. "Since I was 16, Colton replied. "That is when I left home and started working ranches across Texas and New Mexico. I learned from some of the best horsemen in the territory, including a Lipan Apache man named Gray Wolf, who taught me to listen to what horses are trying to tell you." Nora glanced at him with interest. "That must have been quite an education." "It was," Colton agreed. "Gray Wolf taught me that horses are not so different from people. They have been hurt, they remember pain, and they need time to learn that not all humans will cause them harm. Force and violence might get compliance, but patience and respect earn trust." The way he spoke resonated with something deep in Nora's chest. She understood about remembering pain, about being afraid to trust. The Garrett Ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was a modest operation with a sturdy barn, a corral, and a small house surrounded by a few scraggly trees that provided precious shade. An older man with a weathered face and a pronounced limp came out to meet them. "Everett," he called, "you brought help, I see." "This is Miss Nora Thorne," Colton introduced as he helped Nora down from the wagon. "She has agreed to assist with the mare." Garrett looked skeptical. "No offense, miss, but that horse has thrown 2 experienced hands already. She is mean-spirited." "Or frightened," Nora said quietly. "May I see her?" Garrett shrugged and led them to the corral, where a beautiful bay mare paced restlessly along the fence line. She was well built with intelligent eyes, but there was a wildness in the way she moved that spoke of deep distrust. Nora approached the fence slowly, not trying to catch the mare's attention directly. She simply stood there, breathing steadily, letting the horse become accustomed to her presence. After several minutes, the mare stopped pacing and turned to look at her. "Hello, beautiful girl," Nora murmured. "No one here is going to hurt you." She could feel Colton and Garrett watching, but she blocked them out and focused entirely on the mare. Slowly, she climbed onto the first rail of the fence, still making no move to reach for the horse. The mare's ears flicked back and forth, uncertain. Nora began to hum softly, an old lullaby her mother had sung to her as a child. It was something she did without thinking, whenever she was around nervous animals, a way to create a peaceful atmosphere. The mare's ears swiveled forward, and she took a tentative step closer. Time seemed to suspend as Nora continued her quiet humming, never looking directly at the mare, never making any sudden movements. The sun climbed higher, and sweat began to trickle down her back, but she remained patient. Finally, after what must have been 20 minutes, the mare approached the fence and stretched her neck out, nostrils flaring as she took in Nora's scent. Nora very slowly extended her hand, palm down, and let the mare investigate. The soft nose touched her fingers, and Nora felt a rush of triumph. "Good girl," she whispered. "Such a brave, good girl." Behind her, she heard Garrett mutter something surprised, but she did not turn around. She stayed focused on the mare, gradually increasing the contact, running her hand along the horse's nose and up to her forehead. The mare trembled, but did not pull away. "She has been beaten," Nora said, loud enough for the men to hear. "Look at the scars along her withers and the way she flinches when I move too quickly. Someone tried to break her spirit instead of earning her trust." "That explains why she was so cheap at auction," Garrett said, sounding guilty. "I should have looked more carefully." "It is not too late," Colton said. "With time and patience, she can learn that not all humans are cruel." Nora spent the next 2 hours in the corral with the mare, gradually building trust. Colton joined her, and together they showed the horse that human hands could be gentle, that ropes did not have to mean pain. By the time the sun was directly overhead and the heat had become oppressive, the mare was allowing Nora to slip a halter over her head and lead her around the corral. "I will be damned," Garrett said, leaning on the fence. "I have never seen anything like it. Miss Thorne, you have a real gift." Nora felt herself flush with pleasure at the genuine admiration in his voice. It had been so long since anyone had praised her for something she could do, rather than mourning what she could not. "She is a good horse," Nora said. "She just needed someone to show her kindness." On the ride back to town, Colton was quiet for a long while. Finally, he said, "You were remarkable today. The way you connected with that mare, it was like watching someone speak a language most people do not even know exists." "It is only patience," Nora demurred, though his words warmed her. "It is more than that," Colton insisted. "It is empathy and understanding. You saw past her fear to the hurt beneath it, and you knew exactly what she needed." Nora turned to look at him, and their eyes met. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of kindred spirits. She saw in Colton someone who had also been hurt and judged, who had also been told he was not enough, and she realized that he saw the same in her. "Mr. Everett," she began, then hesitated. "Colton, if I may call you that." "Please do," he said, "and I would like to call you Nora, if you are willing." "I am," she said. "Colton, yesterday you told me that I am enough as I am, but you do not know what is wrong with me. You do not know why I was rejected." Colton kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the reins. "I do not need to know the details to know that you are whole and valuable. Whatever someone told you was lacking, they were wrong. You are not defined by what you cannot do, but by who you are. And from what I have seen, you are someone extraordinary." Tears pricked Nora's eyes, but this time they were not tears of grief. "The doctor told me I cannot bear children," she said, needing him to know, needing to hear what he would say when faced with the truth. "My fiancé broke our engagement because of it. He said his family needed heirs, and I could not give him that. In this world, a woman who cannot have children is seen as broken, useless." The wagon slowed as Colton pulled the horses to a stop. They were on a quiet stretch of road, with no other travelers in sight. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Then this world is foolish and cruel," he said firmly. "Nora, I do not know what circumstances led to that diagnosis, and I will not pretend to understand the pain you have endured, but I know with absolute certainty that your worth is not tied to your ability to bear children. You are intelligent, skilled, compassionate, and strong. You have gifts that many people spend their whole lives searching for and never find." "But I cannot give a man children," Nora whispered. "I cannot carry on a family name or provide sons to work the land. In a place like this, that matters." "It matters to people with limited vision," Colton countered. "There are many ways to build a family, many kinds of legacies beyond blood. And any man who cannot see that does not deserve you." Nora searched his face, looking for any hint of pity or false comfort, but she found only honest conviction. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You barely know me." Colton was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and earnest. Because I know what it is like to be told you are not enough. And because from the moment I saw you standing on that street yesterday, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Nora knew she should be cautious, should protect her already battered heart from further damage. But looking into Colton's eyes, she found herself wanting to be brave. I do not know what to do with your kindness, she admitted. I am not accustomed to it anymore. You do not have to do anything, Colton said gently. Just accept it. Let yourself believe, even for a moment, that you are worthy of respect and care. He picked up the reins again and guided the horses back into motion. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, but Nora felt as though something fundamental had shifted inside her. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. Over the following week, Nora found herself at the Garrett Ranch nearly every day, working with the mare that Garrett had named Songbird after hearing Nora's humming. The horse was making remarkable progress, and Nora took deep satisfaction in watching her transform from a frightened, aggressive animal into a trusting companion. Colton was always there, and they fell into an easy partnership. He worked with the other horses on the ranch while Nora focused on Songbird, but they took their meals together under the shade of a cottonwood tree, sharing stories and slowly learning each other's histories. Nora discovered that Colton was 26 years old, 3 years her senior, and that he had been wandering for nearly a decade. He spoke of places she had only read about in newspapers, of mountains and deserts, of thunderstorms that shook the earth and sunsets that painted the sky in impossible colors. In turn, she told him about growing up in Brownsville, about losing her parents to yellow fever when she was 18 and coming to live with Aunt Mabel. She told him about the quiet dreams she had harbored of a simple, peaceful life with a family of her own, and how the doctor's diagnosis had shattered those dreams into sharp fragments that still cut when she examined them too closely. "Do you ever think about leaving Brownsville?" Colton asked one afternoon as they watched Songbird graze peacefully in the corral. "Going somewhere new, where no one knows your history?" "Sometimes," Nora admitted. "But Aunt Mabel needs me, and this is the only home I have ever known. Where would I go? What would I do?" "You could go anywhere," Colton said. "With your gift for working with animals, any ranch would be fortunate to have you. You could go to California, where they are breeding horses for the ranches in the north, or to Colorado, where they need people who understand livestock in the high country." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. "I have never been brave enough for something like that," Nora said. "I think you are braver than you realize," Colton replied. "It takes courage to keep going after the kind of hurt you have experienced. It takes strength to be vulnerable again." His words settled over her like a warm blanket, and Nora realized with a start that she was becoming dangerously close to caring for this man, this near stranger who saw her in ways no one else ever had. It was on a Sunday, when the boarding house was quiet and most of the residents had gone to church, that everything changed. Nora had begged off from services claiming a headache, unwilling to face the congregation's whispers about Thomas and his new fiancé. She was sitting on the front porch with a book when Colton appeared, also dressed in regular clothes rather than his church best. "I thought you would be at services," Nora said, surprised. "I could say the same about you," Colton replied. "Mind if I sit?" Nora gestured to the chair beside her, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the town winding down for its day of rest. "I have been thinking," Colton said eventually, "about what comes next for me. My contract with the ranches around here will be finished in a few weeks, and I will need to decide where to go." Something cold gripped Nora's chest. Of course he would leave. Men like Colton did not stay in one place. She had been foolish to start thinking of him as a permanent fixture in her life. "I see," she managed. "Where are you considering?" "That depends," Colton said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Nora, these past weeks have been the happiest I have had in years. Working alongside you, talking with you, learning who you are, it has made me realize something important." Her heart was pounding now, but she did not dare let herself hope. "What is that?" Colton leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. "I do not want to keep wandering aimlessly. I want to build something real, something lasting. And I want to do that with someone who understands me, who sees the world the way I do." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I want to do that with you." Nora felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her. "Colton, you cannot mean that. You know what I am, what I cannot give you." "I know exactly who you are," Colton said firmly. "You are a woman with extraordinary gifts, with kindness and strength and a capacity for love that takes my breath away. Yes, I know you cannot bear children, and I am telling you that it does not matter to me." "But you are a young man," Nora protested, even as her heart sang with desperate hope. "You could have a wife who could give you sons, who could build a family with you." "I could have a wife I do not love, who could give me children I might not even want," Colton said. "Or I could have you, a partner who challenges me and inspires me and makes me want to be better than I am. There is no question in my mind which choice I want to make." Nora stood abruptly, needing to move, needing to think. "This is madness. We have known each other for barely 2 weeks." "I know," Colton said, standing as well but keeping his distance. "I know it is fast, and I know you have every reason to be cautious. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking you to consider the possibility that we could build a life together, that you could be loved and cherished exactly as you are, with no conditions or expectations beyond being yourself." She turned to face him, and the sincerity in his expression made her chest ache. "What if you change your mind?" she whispered. "What if you wake up one day and realize you want more than I can give you?" Colton closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. His touch was warm and solid, an anchor in the storm of her emotions. "I will not change my mind," he said. "Nora, I have lived long enough and seen enough of the world to know what matters. Family is not just about blood. A legacy is not only measured in children. If you and I married, we could make a life that matters in 100 different ways. We could work with horses, help people, maybe even take in children who need homes. There are so many orphans in this world who need love and stability." The picture he painted was so beautiful, so tempting, that Nora felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I am afraid," she confessed. "I am afraid to believe that this could be real, that someone could truly want me despite my brokenness." "You are not broken," Colton said fiercely. "Do you hear me? You are whole and perfect exactly as you are. And yes, I want you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to work alongside you every day. I want to grow old with you and build a life that we can be proud of. I want all of that, and I want it with you." Nora looked into his eyes and saw no pity, no doubt, only absolute conviction. And in that moment, something inside her that had been tightly closed began to open. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want it so much it terrifies me." Colton's face broke into a smile that transformed him, and he pulled her into his arms. Nora melted into his embrace, feeling safe and valued for the first time since the doctor had delivered his devastating diagnosis. "Then say yes," Colton murmured against her hair. "Not to marriage, not yet. Just say yes to letting me court you properly. Say yes to exploring what this could be between us." Nora pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like a promise, like a beginning. "Yes, Colton, I will let you court me." He kissed her then, gently and reverently, and Nora felt as though she was being put back together piece by piece. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, she saw Aunt Mabel watching from the window with a satisfied expression on her face. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Nora had experienced with Thomas. Where Thomas had been proper and distant, always aware of appearances and social expectations, Colton was present and engaged. He brought her flowers he picked from the roadside, not expensive hothouse blooms, but wildflowers that thrived in the harsh Texas climate. He listened when she spoke and remembered small details she mentioned in passing. They spent their days at the Garrett Ranch, and as Songbird blossomed under their combined care, so did the relationship between Nora and Colton. They worked in perfect synchronicity, anticipating each other's movements, communicating with glances and small gestures. Garrett watched them with an approving eye and began referring to them as a matched pair. One afternoon, about a month after Colton had first declared his intentions, they were riding back to town when they encountered a commotion on the road. A wagon had thrown a wheel, and a family stood beside it, looking distressed. There were 2 young children, both thin and dusty, and a woman who looked exhausted beyond measure. "Trouble?" Colton called, bringing their wagon to a stop. The man, haggard and hollow-eyed, nodded. Wheel split clean through. We were heading to Brownsville, hoping to find work, but now I do not know what we will do. Colton jumped down immediately. Let me take a look. Maybe we can rig something temporarily to get you into town. While Colton examined the wheel, Nora climbed down and approached the woman, who was trying to soothe a crying infant. May I help? She offered. The woman looked at her with such desperate gratitude that Nora's heart twisted. I do not mean to be trouble, the woman said, but the baby is hungry and we ran out of milk this morning. We have some water and bread in our wagon, Nora said. Let me get it for you. She retrieved their provisions and watched as the family fell on the simple food as though it were a feast. The children, a boy of about 5 and a girl of 7, ate with single-minded focus, and Nora realized they had probably been hungry for much longer than just today. Where are you coming from? Nora asked gently. Kansas, the woman replied. We had a farm, but the drought took everything. We heard there might be opportunities in Texas, but the journey has been harder than we expected. She looked down at the baby in her arms, tears streaming down her face. I do not know if we are going to make it. Nora felt a fierce protective instinct rise in her chest. She thought of Colton's words about building a family in different ways, about taking in children who needed homes. She thought of all the love she had stored up with nowhere to spend it. You are going to make it, Nora said firmly. We will get you to town, and I will make sure you have a place to stay until you can get on your feet. The woman stared at her in disbelief. Why would you help us? You do not even know us. Because someone helped me once when I needed it, Nora said simply, glancing over at Colton, who was working with the husband to secure the wagon wheel. It took some doing, but they managed to get the damaged wagon stable enough to limp into Brownsville, with Colton's wagon following behind in case of further trouble. Nora directed them to Aunt Mabel's boarding house, knowing her aunt had a big heart beneath her practical exterior. Aunt Mabel took one look at the bedraggled family and immediately went into action, setting up the small room usually reserved for storage and preparing a large meal. While the family ate, Nora and Colton explained the situation. They need work and a chance to recover, Colton said. I was thinking I could speak to Garrett about hiring the man. He mentioned needing help with the irrigation system. And I can ask around about sewing work for the wife, Aunt Mabel added. She looks handy with a needle. Watching the family begin to relax as they realized they had found safety, Nora felt something shift inside her. This was what mattered, this act of reaching out to help others. This was the legacy she could build, not through biology, but through compassion. Later that evening, after the family had been settled and the excitement had died down, Nora and Colton sat on the back porch under a sky full of stars. You were amazing today, Colton said. The way you stepped in to help without hesitation. I was thinking about what you said, Nora replied, about family being more than blood. When I saw those children, so hungry and afraid, I realized that there are so many ways to make a difference in the world. I may not be able to bear children, but I can still nurture and protect. I can still love. Colton took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. That family is going to remember your kindness for the rest of their lives. Those children are going to grow up knowing that when they were at their lowest, a stranger showed them mercy. That is a legacy worth having. Nora rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she had not known was possible. I am starting to believe you, she said, about being enough, about having value beyond what I thought defined me. Good, Colton murmured, because it is true, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how extraordinary you are. They sat together in comfortable silence, and Nora allowed herself to imagine a future that was not defined by loss, but by possibility. She pictured herself and Colton working together, helping families like the one they had met today, training horses, building something meaningful. It was a different dream than the one she had once held, but it was no less beautiful. The summer heat intensified as June gave way to July, and Brownsville settled into the familiar rhythm of scorching days and warm nights. Nora and Colton continued their work at the Garrett Ranch, and Songbird had progressed so well that she now accepted a saddle and allowed Garrett himself to ride her around the property. You two have worked a miracle with this horse, Garrett said one afternoon, watching Songbird trot peacefully along the fence line with one of his ranch hands in the saddle. I would like to hire you both permanently if you are willing. I am getting too old to manage everything myself, and I could use people I trust. Colton looked at Nora, a question in his eyes. They had talked about the future in abstract terms, but this was a concrete offer, a chance to put down roots. "Could you give us a few days to discuss it?" Nora asked. "Take all the time you need," Garrett said. "The offer stands whenever you are ready." That evening, Nora and Colton took a walk along the Rio Grande, watching the sun sink toward the horizon and paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The air was thick with the scent of mesquite and the sound of evening birds. "What are you thinking?" Colton asked, keeping his pace matched to hers. "I am thinking about what I want from life," Nora said. 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what that was. I would marry Thomas, we would have a conventional life, and I would measure my worth by my ability to be a proper wife and mother. When that was taken away from me, I felt like my life was over." She paused, picking up a smooth stone and tossing it into the slow-moving water. "But now I see that there are so many possibilities I never considered. Working with horses brings me joy in a way I never expected. Helping that family last month made me feel useful and needed. And being with you—" She trailed off, suddenly shy. "Being with me what?" Colton prompted gently. Nora turned to face him, the setting sun casting his face in warm light. "Being with you makes me feel seen and valued in ways I never thought possible. You look at me and see a whole person, not a woman with a defect. You talk about our future as though it is something to anticipate, not to mourn." Colton reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely tender. "Because it is something to anticipate. Nora, every day with you is a gift. I wake up grateful for the chance to work beside you, to learn from you, to simply exist in your presence." "I love you," Nora said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I know it is fast. I know we should probably take more time, but I cannot keep it inside any longer. I love you, Colton Everett." The smile that spread across Colton's face was radiant. "I love you too," he said. "I have loved you since the day I watched you transform a frightened horse through nothing but patience and compassion. I have loved you since you opened your heart to a struggling family without a moment's hesitation. I love everything you are, Nora Thorne, and I want to spend my life proving it to you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Nora felt as though her heart might burst from the intensity of her emotions. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colton dropped to one knee in the sandy soil beside the river. "I do not have a ring yet," he said, looking up at her with eyes full of love and certainty. "But I cannot wait another moment. Nora Thorne, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, whatever form that takes? Will you let me love you and cherish you for all the days we are given?" Nora felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Colton, I will marry you." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with delight. When he set her down, they stood pressed together, foreheads touching, grinning like fools. "We should probably tell your aunt," Colton said eventually. "She already knows," Nora replied. "I think she knew before we did." They walked back to town hand in hand, making plans as they went. They would accept Garrett's job offer, which would give them a stable income and a place in the community. They would marry in the small church with just close friends and family present, no elaborate ceremony or pretense. And they would start their life together in the small foreman's cottage on Garrett's property, building their future one day at a time. When they reached the boarding house, Aunt Mabel took one look at their joined hands and radiant faces and burst into happy tears. "Finally," she said, pulling them both into a fierce hug. "I thought you two would never sort yourselves out." The wedding was planned for mid-August, giving them enough time to make arrangements, but not so much time that the waiting would be unbearable. Nora sewed her own dress with help from Aunt Mabel, choosing a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk that would be practical for her new life on the ranch. There was inevitably gossip. Some of the town's more traditional residents whispered about how quickly the courtship had progressed, and there were those who questioned whether Colton truly understood what he was getting into by marrying a woman who could not give him children. It was Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house resident who had made the pointed comment about Thomas's new engagement, who finally confronted Nora directly. She caught her in the general store one afternoon, her expression full of false concern. "My dear Nora," she said loudly enough for other shoppers to hear, "I feel I must speak to you as a friend. Are you certain Mr. Everett understands about your condition? It would be a terrible thing to trap him in a marriage only to have him resent you later. Nora felt her cheeks flame, but before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the awkward silence. "Mr. Everett understands perfectly. Thank you for your concern." Colton had appeared beside Nora, his expression pleasant but his eyes hard. "And I would appreciate if you would not discuss my fiancé's private medical matters in public." Mrs. Henderson drew herself up indignantly. "I was only trying to help." "Then the best way to help would be to mind your own business," Colton said flatly. He took Nora's arm. "Come on, darling, we have things to do." Outside the store, Nora let out a shaky breath. "Thank you for that." "You do not need to thank me for defending you," Colton said, "though I wish you had let me do more than just shut her down. I was tempted to educate her on exactly how narrow-minded and cruel her attitude is." "She represents how many people think," Nora said. "I have to get used to it." "No, you do not," Colton countered. "You deserve to live without people constantly questioning your worth or our relationship. If people in Brownsville cannot accept us, then maybe we should consider going somewhere else eventually." Nora looked at him in surprise. "You would leave because of gossip?" "I would leave if staying made you unhappy," Colton said simply. "My home is wherever you are, Nora. The specific location does not matter to me." His unwavering support made Nora feel invincible, and she realized that this was what true partnership looked like. Not someone who tolerated her despite her perceived flaws, but someone who actively defended her right to be treated with dignity. The day of the wedding dawned clear and hot. Nora dressed in Aunt Mabel's room, her hands steady as she buttoned the silk dress and pinned her dark hair into an elegant twist. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, she realized with some wonder. She looked like someone who had found her place in the world. The ceremony was held in the small Baptist church, with the windows thrown open to catch any hint of breeze. The pews were sparsely populated, just Aunt Mabel, Garrett and his wife, a few of Colton's ranching contacts, and the family they had helped on the road, who had insisted on attending to show their gratitude. Nora walked down the aisle without a formal escort, her head held high. When she reached the altar and Colton took her hands, she saw her own joy and certainty reflected in his eyes. The minister, an elderly man who had known Nora since childhood, spoke about the true meaning of marriage. "A union is not built on societal expectations or the continuation of bloodlines," he said, looking directly at the few congregants who had shown disapproval. "It is built on love, respect, and partnership. These two people have found something rare and precious, and it is our duty as a community to celebrate and support them." When the time came for vows, Colton squeezed Nora's hands and spoke from the heart. "Nora, I promise to love you exactly as you are, every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams and celebrate your victories. I promise to remind you of your worth whenever you forget it, and to build a life with you that brings us both joy and fulfillment." Nora's voice trembled slightly as she responded. "Colton, I promise to trust in your love even when my fears tell me I am not deserving of it. I promise to be your partner and your equal, to work beside you and dream with you. I promise to build a family with you in whatever form that takes, and to make our life together a testament to the power of love over expectation." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Colton's kiss was both tender and triumphant, and the small gathering erupted in genuine celebration. The reception was held at the boarding house, with Aunt Mabel having prepared an impressive spread, despite the limited guest list. As the afternoon wore on and the guests mingled and ate, Nora found herself standing beside Colton, watching the scene with contentment. The husband from the family they had helped approached them, his young children trailing behind him. "Mr. and Mrs. Everett," he said formally, "my wife and I wanted to thank you again for everything you have done for us. Because of you, I have a job, my family has a home, and my children have full bellies. We will never forget your kindness." "You would have done the same for us," Colton said, shaking the man's hand warmly. After the man had moved away, Nora leaned into her new husband's side. "Do you know what I realized today?" she said. "I am not broken. I never was. I was just told I was broken by people who could not see past one single aspect of who I am. But you helped me see the truth." "And what is that?" Colton asked, wrapping his arm around her waist. "That I am whole and valuable exactly as I am. that my worth is not determined by my body's limitations, but by my heart's capacity, that I can build a meaningful life and create a lasting legacy through love and compassion rather than biology. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. You helped me see that, Colton. You saw me when I could not see myself. You were always there, Colton said softly. I just reminded you to look. As the sun set on their wedding day, Nora and Colton slipped away from the celebration and rode out to their new home, the foreman's cottage on Garrett's ranch. It was small but sturdy, with a wide porch and windows that overlooked the corral, where Songbird and the other horses grazed peacefully. Inside, they had spent the previous weeks making it their own. Simple furniture, colorful quilts, and books on the shelves. It was not grand, but it was theirs, earned through honest work and filled with possibility. That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Colton traced patterns on Nora's shoulder and spoke into the darkness. Do you know what I am most looking forward to? He asked. What is that? Nora murmured sleepily, content and loved in a way she had never imagined possible. Everything, Colton said simply. I am looking forward to waking up next to you every morning and learning something new about you every day. I am looking forward to working with horses and helping people and building something that matters. I am looking forward to all the adventures we have not even thought of yet. I am looking forward to our whole life together. Nora turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. I love you, she said. Thank you for showing me that I am enough. You are more than enough, Colton replied. You are everything. They settled into married life with surprising ease, their days falling into a comfortable rhythm. Nora worked with the horses, discovering that her gift extended beyond just Songbird. She had a way of gentling even the most stubborn animals, and soon neighboring ranches were asking for her help with their difficult horses. Colton proved to be an excellent foreman, managing Garrett's ranch with efficiency and fairness. He modernized some of the practices, introducing techniques he had learned during his years of traveling, and the operation began to thrive under his leadership. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch and talk about their day, sharing small victories and funny stories. Sometimes Garrett and his wife would join them, and they would play cards or simply enjoy each other's company. The sense of belonging, of being part of a community that valued them, was something Nora had not realized she was missing until she found it. It was in October, as the oppressive heat finally began to break and the first hints of cooler weather arrived, that the orphan children came into their lives. A representative from a children's aid society in San Antonio visited the ranch looking for Nora specifically. She was a stern-faced woman named Miss Blackwell who got straight to the point. I have heard you and your husband have a gift with damaged creatures, she said, settling into the chair Nora offered on the porch. The word around the territory is that you took in a family when they were desperate, and that you work miracles with troubled horses. We do what we can to help, Nora said carefully, wondering where this was leading. Miss Blackwell opened the case she carried and pulled out several folders. I have 3 children in my care who desperately need a home. They are siblings, ages 6, 8, and 10. Their parents died in a fire 6 months ago, and they have been passed between temporary placements ever since. They are considered difficult, prone to outbursts and distrust. Most families want younger children or singles, not a set of 3 who come with challenges. Nora felt her heart clench. What are their names? Samuel is 10, Ruth is 8, and Jacob is 6, Miss Blackwell said. They have suffered terrible loss and have every reason to be mistrustful of adults. But they need stability and love, and I believe you and your husband could provide that. When Colton came home that evening, Nora told him about the visit. She watched his face carefully, unsure how he would react to such a life-changing proposal. 3 children, Colton said slowly. That is a significant responsibility. I know, Nora said, and I would understand if you think it is too much, too fast. We have only been married for 2 months. But Colton, when Miss Blackwell described these children, all I could think about was how much they must be hurting, how desperate they must be for someone to show them kindness and stability. Colton was quiet for a long moment, and Nora held her breath. Then he smiled, that wonderful warm smile that had first captured her heart. When can we meet them? He asked. The meeting was arranged for the following week. Miss Blackwell brought the children to the ranch in a wagon, and Nora watched from the porch as 3 small figures climbed down, their faces closed and wary. Samuel, the oldest, positioned himself protectively in front of his younger siblings. He had dark hair and his father's eyes, according to Miss Blackwell, and he looked at the world as though expecting it to hurt him. Ruth was small for 8, with tangled blonde curls and a fierce expression that reminded Nora of Songbird when they had first met. Jacob, the youngest, clung to Samuel's hand and would not meet anyone's eyes. "Children, these are Mr. and Mrs. Everett," Miss Blackwell said. "They have invited you to visit their ranch today." "We do not want to visit," Samuel said flatly. "We want to stay together, and everyone who says they will keep us together changes their mind." Nora crouched down, so she was at eye level with the boy. "I understand," she said gently. "You have been disappointed before, and you have no reason to trust us. But I promise you this, if you agree to come live with us, we will not separate you. My husband and I, we believe that family means sticking together." "Why would you want us?" Ruth asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Miss Blackwell says we are too much trouble." "I said you had faced challenges," Miss Blackwell corrected. "There is a difference." "I want you because I know what it is like to be told you are broken," Nora said honestly. "I know what it is like to have people look at you and see only your problems instead of your worth. And my husband and we believe that everyone deserves to be loved and valued, not despite their difficulties, but as whole people." Samuel studied her for a long moment, and Nora could see him weighing her words, trying to decide if they could be trusted. Finally, he said, "Can we see the horses?" It was a test, Nora realized. He was giving them a chance to prove themselves. "Of course," she said. "Come with me." She led the children to the corral, where Songbird and several other horses were grazing. As they approached, Songbird lifted her head and trotted over, nickering softly. "This is Songbird," Nora said. "When she first came to this ranch, she was frightened and angry. She had been hurt by people, and she did not trust anyone. But with patience and kindness, she learned that not all humans would cause her pain." Ruth reached out tentatively toward the mare, and Songbird lowered her head, allowing the girl to touch her nose. Something in Ruth's expression softened, and Nora saw a glimpse of the vulnerable child beneath the defensive exterior. Over the next few hours, Nora and Colton showed the children around the ranch. They did not pressure them or make extravagant promises. They simply let the children explore, answering questions honestly and giving them space to process. It was Jacob, the youngest, who finally broke through the careful distance. He had been watching Colton work with one of the horses, showing him how to properly brush and care for the animal's coat. Suddenly, he asked in a small voice, "If we came to live here, would we have to work all the time?" "You would have chores appropriate for your ages," Colton said, "but you would also have time to play and learn and just be children. You have had to grow up too fast, and you deserve to have some joy in your lives." "Our mother used to sing to us," Jacob said, his eyes filling with tears. "Before the fire, she would sing us to sleep every night." Nora felt her own eyes burn with emotion. "What was her favorite song?" she asked gently. Jacob thought for a moment, then began to hum a simple melody. Nora recognized it as an old lullaby, one her own mother had sung. Without thinking, she began to hum along, and Jacob's face lit up with surprised delight. "You know it," he said. "I do," Nora confirmed. "And if you come to live with us, I promise I will sing it to you every night if you would like." By the time Miss Blackwell prepared to take the children back to San Antonio, something had shifted. The walls had not come down completely, but there were cracks, and Nora could see the hope beginning to peek through. "We will think about it," Samuel said, speaking for all 3 of them. "But I need to know, are you sure you want all of us? You would not rather just take Ruth or Jacob and leave me behind?" "We want all of you," Colton said firmly. "You are a family, and families stay together. If you come here, you come as a unit, and you will be treated as such." Samuel nodded slowly, and Nora saw him blink back tears. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we will come." The process of formally adopting the children took several months, involving paperwork and home visits and assessments. During that time, the children came to stay for increasingly longer periods, gradually learning that Nora and Colton meant what they said about providing a stable, loving home. It was not always easy. All 3 children had nightmares, and there were days when their grief and trauma manifested in anger or withdrawal. Samuel tested boundaries constantly, waiting for Nora and Colton to prove him right by giving up on them. Ruth struggled with trust and would lash out verbally when she felt vulnerable. Jacob clung to Nora desperately, terrified that she would disappear like his mother had. but Nora and Colton remained patient and consistent, exactly as they had been with Songbird and the other troubled horses. They set clear boundaries, but enforced them with love rather than anger. They acknowledged the children's pain rather than dismissing it, and slowly, painstakingly, they earned 3 sets of trust. It was a cold December morning when the final adoption papers were signed, making Samuel, Ruth, and Jacob legally part of the Everett family. They celebrated with a simple party at the ranch, with Aunt Mabel and the Garretts and several of the neighbors who had watched the family come together. That night, after the children had been tucked into their beds, each one kissed goodnight and reminded that they were loved. Nora and Colton sat on their porch wrapped in heavy blankets against the chill. "Can you believe how much our lives have changed in less than a year?" Nora asked, leaning against Colton's shoulder. "It feels like a lifetime ago that I saw you standing on that street in town," Colton replied. "You looked so lost, and I just wanted to help somehow." "You did more than help," Nora said. "You showed me that my worth was not tied to what I could not do. You taught me that family comes in many forms and that love is not limited by biology. Because of you, I have a life I never could have imagined, and 3 children who need us as much as we need them." "They do need us," Colton agreed, "but we need them too. They have taught me that patience and love can heal even the deepest wounds. They have shown me what it means to be a father, not through genetics but through choice and commitment." Nora tilted her head up to kiss him softly. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Choosing me and this life instead of something more conventional?" "Never," Colton said without hesitation. "Not for a single moment. You are enough, Nora. You have always been enough, and our family, the one we have built through love and intention, is more meaningful than any traditional path could have been." Inside the house, they heard Jacob call out, waking from a nightmare. Without a word, they both stood and went to him, Nora sitting on one side of his bed and Colton on the other. Nora sang the lullaby as she smoothed Jacob's hair, and gradually the little boy relaxed back into sleep. "You are safe," Nora whispered. "You are loved. You are home." As they returned to their own room, Nora felt a profound sense of gratitude. 6 months ago, she had believed her life was over, that she had nothing to offer the world. Now she understood that she had everything that mattered. She had a partner who valued her, children who needed her, meaningful work that fulfilled her, and a community that was slowly learning to see beyond narrow definitions of worth and family. The years that followed were full of challenges and triumphs. Samuel struggled with school, but discovered a talent for working with the horses that rivaled Nora's own gift. Ruth's fierce nature found an outlet in defending her brothers, and eventually in advocating for other children in difficult circumstances. Jacob's gentle sweetness never faded, and he grew into a kind and thoughtful young man who had a gift for making others feel seen and valued. Nora and Colton expanded their work, taking in other troubled horses and eventually helping several more families who found themselves in desperate situations. Their little ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where broken things were made whole, where worth was measured in compassion rather than convention. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Colton surprised Nora with a gift. It was a small wooden sign that read, "Everett Ranch, where everyone is enough." He hung it over the entrance to their property, and Nora cried happy tears as she read it. "This is what we have built," Colton said, pulling her close. "A place where people and animals can heal. A place where family is defined by love. A place where everyone who enters knows they have value." "I love you," Nora said. "Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself. Thank you for being patient when I needed time to heal. Thank you for showing me that being enough was never about meeting someone else's expectations, but about accepting myself exactly as I am." That evening, they sat around the dinner table with their 3 children, now 12, 14, and 16. Samuel was talking excitedly about a particularly difficult horse he had finally managed to gentle. Ruth was planning a fundraiser to help orphan children in San Antonio. Jacob was asking about a stray dog he had found, wondering if they could add it to their growing menagerie. Looking at her family, at the life she and Colton had created together, Nora felt a completeness she had never experienced before. This was her legacy, not biological children who carried her genes, but young people she had helped to heal, animals she had treated with compassion, and a community she had served with her gifts. "What are you thinking about?" Colton asked later that night as they prepared for bed. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Nora said. When the doctor told me I could not have children, I thought it was the end of everything. I thought I would never have a family or a purpose. But I was wrong. I have a family that I chose and who chose me. I have work that matters. And I have you, the person who loved me enough to show me my own worth." Colton pulled her into his arms. "You would have found your way eventually," he said. "You are too strong and too good not to have done. But I am grateful I got to be part of your journey." They stood together in the quiet of their bedroom, listening to the sounds of their home settling around them. From down the hall came the soft breathing of their sleeping children. Outside, the horses moved peacefully in their corral. Somewhere in the house, the stray dog Jacob had adopted was probably curled up in front of the dying fire. "This is what happiness looks like," Nora said softly. "Not what I thought it would be, but something better, something real." As the years continued to pass, the Everett Ranch became a cornerstone of the community. Nora's reputation as a horse whisperer spread far and wide, and people came from across Texas and beyond to learn from her. She taught her methods freely, believing that knowledge should be shared and that the more people who treated animals with compassion, the better the world would be. Colton became a respected figure in Brownsville, known for his fairness and his willingness to help those in need. He served on the town council and advocated for better treatment of workers and for support systems for struggling families. Together, he and Nora embodied the belief that worth was inherent, not earned through meeting arbitrary standards. Their children grew into remarkable adults. Samuel took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch and expanded it to include a training program for young people who wanted to learn to work with horses. Ruth became a teacher and eventually founded a school for orphaned and disadvantaged children. Jacob studied medicine and returned to Brownsville to serve as the town doctor, carrying forward his adoptive parents' legacy of compassion and service. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nora and Colton sat on the same porch where they had shared so many evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had made their own. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Nora asked. "When you saw me on the street in town?" "I said that storms always pass," Colton replied. "Even the worst ones." "You were right," Nora said. "The storm did pass, and what came after was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined." Colton took her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses that years of work had created. "I told you that you were enough as you are," he said, "and I have spent 20 years proving it to you, but I think you know it now. I think you finally believe it." Nora smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had found peace with herself and her place in the world. "I do believe it," she said. "I am enough. I always was. And our life together, the family we have built, and the work we have done, it is proof that there are many paths to meaning and fulfillment. My value was never tied to my ability to bear children. It was always tied to my capacity to love, to heal, to serve, and to grow." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their adult children gathering for the anniversary celebration, their voices mixing with those of spouses and, now, grandchildren that had been adopted into the family, the same way Samuel, Ruth, and Jacob had been. "Our family tree is going to confuse historians," Colton joked. "No biological connections, just love holding everyone together." "That is the best kind of family tree," Nora replied. "One that grows through intention and choice, where everyone knows they belong because they are wanted, not because of accidents of birth." As they rose to join their family for the celebration, Colton pulled Nora close one more time. "Thank you," he said, "for taking a chance on a wandering cowboy who did not know what he was looking for until he found you. Thank you for building this life with me, for being my partner in every sense of the word. Thank you for showing me that love is not about perfection, but about acceptance and growth." "Thank you for seeing me," Nora replied, "for looking past what the world said I lacked and recognizing what I had to offer. Thank you for telling me I was enough and then spending 2 decades proving it with every action. Thank you for being the kind of man who measures worth by character rather than convention." They walked inside together, into the warm glow of family and love, into the life they had created through courage and compassion. And as Nora looked around at the people gathered in her home, at the evidence of the legacy she and Colton had built, she felt a profound sense of completion. She had been rejected for being unable to bear children, told she was broken and insufficient. But Colton had said, "You are enough as you are," and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to see herself clearly, to recognize her own worth, and to build a life that honored her gifts rather than mourning her limitations. And that, Nora thought as she embraced her family and felt the love that surrounded her, was the true definition of a happily ever after. Not a life without challenges or pain, but a life built on acceptance, love, and the understanding that every person has inherent worth. Not a conventional path, but a meaningful one. Not what she had expected, but something infinitely better. As the celebration continued late into the night, with stories and laughter filling every corner of the ranch house, Nora found a quiet moment to step outside and look up at the stars. The Texas sky stretched endlessly above her, vast and full of possibility, just as it had been on that day 20 years ago, when a cowboy with kind eyes had told her that storms always pass. The storm had passed, the hurt had healed, and what remained was joy, purpose, and love in abundance. She was enough, exactly as she was, and she finally, completely believed it. And that belief had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone she touched, creating ripples of compassion and acceptance that would extend far beyond her years. Colton joined her, slipping his arm around her waist as naturally as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Nora said, echoing his words from their wedding night. "I am thinking about everything we have built, and everything we still have ahead of us. I am thinking about how grateful I am for every moment of this beautiful, unexpected life." "I am grateful too," Colton said, "for you, for our family, for the journey that brought us together. I would not change a single thing." They stood together under the stars, two people who had found each other when they both needed it most, who had built something real and lasting from pain and rejection. And as they turned to rejoin their family, Nora carried with her the knowledge that she had always been enough, that love came in many forms, and that the most meaningful legacies were built not through biology, but through the intentional act of opening one's heart to others. The lights of the ranch house glowed warm and welcoming, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a testament to the power of love to heal and transform. And inside those walls, surrounded by the family they had created through choice and commitment, Nora and Colton Everett lived out their days in happiness, proving every single day that worth is inherent, that family is defined by love, and that being enough is not about meeting others' expectations, but about embracing one's true self with courage and grace. Their story became legend in Brownsville and beyond, whispered as encouragement to anyone who felt broken or insufficient. The story of a woman who was rejected for being unable to bear children, and the cowboy who said, "You are enough as you are," and then spent his life proving it. It was a story of healing and hope, of building family from love rather than blood, of creating meaning through compassion and service. It was a story that proved that the most beautiful endings often come from the most painful beginnings, and that true love is not about perfection, but about seeing and valuing another person exactly as they are. And they lived happily ever after, not because their lives were without struggle, but because they faced every challenge together, grounded in the unshakable knowledge that they were enough, individually and together, to build a life worth living and a legacy worth leaving. Their ranch continued to be a place of healing for decades. Their children carried forward their values of compassion and acceptance, and their love story remained a testament to the power of looking past society's narrow definitions to see the truth. That every person has inherent worth, that family comes in many forms, and that being enough is not about what you can produce, but about who you are and how you love.